Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the newly released book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. It's a historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today, we're speaking with Lisa Rowan of Rowan Consulting. So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa. Lisa is the principal of Rowan Consulting. She has over 25 years of successful fundraising, sales, and marketing experience. Her clients have included prominent nonprofits such as Museum of the Bible, the Cross Catholic Outreach, Faith and Freedom Coalition, Answers in Genesis, and numerous other organizations that serve causes close to her heart. She is a founding and current advisory board member for the Museum of the Bible's Catholic Advisory Board and also serves on the advisory boards for the National Shroud of Turin exhibit and curating for him. Lisa received their BA in Communications and Public Address from the University of Wisconsin. Throughout her career, Lisa has been recognized by her customers and peers as someone who has high expectations, a drive for excellence, and a commitment to achieving outstanding results. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, guys. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, absolutely. Look forward to your comments and other on the Shroud of Turin. But first, let's start with so what is your backstory on the Shroud of Turin?
Well, I was just been over in the most recent years that I became involved with the Shroud of Turin, and it was because of my involvement with one of my clients, the Museum of the Bible. And shortly after the museum opened in 2017, the CEO at the time had approached me and asked what I thought about the Shroud of Turin and whether that would be a good exhibit to have there. So again, the Shroud doesn't travel anywhere, but it would be an exhibit and kind of an immersive experience about the Shroud. And so that's kind of where it all started. And then it took a number of years to get it off the ground. But we did have a wonderful exhibit there in 2022. It was there from February until July, only 5 months, but it was the most popular exhibit that they've had to date for their short-term exhibits. And that's kind of how it started. So I had grown up and known about, heard about the Shroud of Turin, but I didn't really know as much as I do now. Thankfully, through that exhibit and through the different events that we had over the years prior to the exhibit opening, during the opening, and then once it closed too, we had another. That's where I kind of really, my passion for it even grew more because it's just a fascinating artifact that the more you know, the more you want to know. I think you know that as well, just from your history and love of history. So that's kind of how I got involved with the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're so right. The exhibit that was at the Museum of the Bible was just awesome, and the launch and everything was just perfect. So really great job in being involved in that, and then actually being able to bring the Shroud, a replica of the Shroud, but also everything else that was there to the museum, so that more people can really learn about the Shroud and try and understand some of the mysteries about it.
Yeah, so I lost you a little bit there at the beginning, guys. So I'm not sure if you asked a question or.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we'll end up cutting this out a little bit. Yes, you kind of blocked. You kind of froze up there a little bit. I'm not sure if it was on my side or your side, but if it happens again in a big way, then we'll have to figure something else out here. So
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, Lisa, yes, the exhibit of the Shroud, which had a replica, a really absolutely gorgeous replica of the Shroud at the Museum of the Bible, was one of the highlights of seeing that and being being there at the Shroud of Turin. I was at the launch, and I think I was at one other event. And you guys did a great job in bringing that whole exhibit together, and some of the other things that you had there as well. So what was it like to be launching something that's as valuable and as studied and as mysterious as the Shroud of Turin?
Yeah, it was an incredible couple of years because it really did take a few years to get it going and get, just to get the funding for it. And then also COVID came into place. So the exhibit was originally supposed to open in 2021 and we opened it in 2022. Honestly, I think that was a blessing because it gave the curatorial staff even more time to do more with the exhibit. So I think that actually ended up being a great thing that happened, even though it was a disappointment at the time that we were going to have to delay it further. Because it did take a while to get it set up. But yeah, like you said, the replica, we have that beautiful linen replica from the Shroud of Turin Center. And it really is, it's beautiful. And one of my favorite things in there was, and I know you were at the launch, they had a bench right in front of it. And so I think, most people aren't ever going to get a chance to go to to see the shroud up close. And this is really an opportunity to see what the shroud looks like up close and spend time with it. And I remember, actually, I have several memories of going in there and watching people just sitting on the bench reflecting quietly. And it's just so powerful and beautiful. And having that in your view, you really see how Jesus suffered for us. And I think that replica just is a beautiful, it's just, even though we can't be in Italy and see the actual shroud, it's just a great kind of second experience. So that was, I think that was how we also had that, there was a table that was, the size of the shroud, and it had different touch points on it. So you could see, and I love watching people play with this because wherever you touched it, it would say, you would hear scripture saying exactly where it talks about that Christ's passion happening. So, or a marking, like a fire marking or something like that. So I thought that was another like really touching, great way to really show, what the shroud is about and what it actually says. It tells a story. So
Yeah.
those are two of the things. There's many things in that exhibit. Another thing which I thought, and I don't know if you got a chance to do this, but at the very end, people could write little notes and say what that exhibit or what they learned about the exhibit that they didn't know before. So I would love to go in there and just read different things about what people said from all different ages, even different languages. I believe the museum captured all that. I haven't seen the results of all of it, but I would go in there whenever I was at the museum just to kind of read that because it was always fascinating to me.
Yeah, it surely was. And
then another, just the shroud, again, the more you know about it, the more fascinated you become.
So Lisa, you were talking about the writings that people submitted. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it just really showed a variety of people's emotions and what they learned. A lot of it was just, actually, quite honestly, there's a lot of hope in it. I think people got a lot of hope from the shroud, or the shroud exhibit, I should say. So I can't recall offhand different ones, but even I would purposely go in there to read those because it gave something to me to show, knowing that people had all these great feelings. Again, there is some people, there's people that also posted negative things, but the majority of them were very positive. And again, they took away different parts. So maybe it was that they learned something that they didn't know, but a lot of it was just thanking the museum too for having this exhibit and sharing more about the Shroud of Turin, because it really is amazing. And one thing I was going to say is we had these different events, which is different we have never really done this at the museum before, where we had these major events prior to an opening of an exhibit. It was because of the Shroud of Turin is just such a huge interest. So we were able to have these different events with these renowned speakers. And after every event, we would have a Q&A where people could write down questions and then we'd ask different questions. And I remember the very first one we had, and maybe you were at this one, it was in the World Stage Theater. It was like almost 500 people, it was fully booked. And we gave people like 10 minutes to write down questions and go to the restroom too. And we came back and we answered some of the questions. We didn't have a lot of time, but anyways, I compiled all those questions. And just to show you like the depth of them, there's 100 unique questions asked, 100. That's a lot of questions in a short amount of time, but it just shows you, we had these amazing speakers talking about different aspects of the shroud and the questions that came out of that. A lot of them had to do with the actual image itself. There was a lot on testing too. But just on the history, on people's faith, on the Catholic Church's position. I mean, there's just a ton. And again, all fascinating, all interesting. You learn something just from the questions and having the questions answered. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes with the that some of the statements that that the shroud is not only the most studied relic, it's the most important relic, but it's also the most mysterious relic, and it has the greatest mysteries associated with it. And it's not just about whether the image and how that image was made on there, but it's about the whole thing that's related to it. You have the blood stains that directly reflect what's in the Gospels. You have then what potentially happened afterward. What happened to it? It was in the tomb. If it was in the tomb, then how did it get from the tomb to where it is today? And so there's so much that there's, it just brings up so many questions. And one thing too, I'm not sure, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts on it, but as I've gotten involved with studying the shroud, I found that as you delve into it more, it just opens up even more and more and more and more questions.
It does. And again, I think for me anyways, again, I think everybody needs to come to their own conclusion. But what I found as I was listening to all these different speakers throughout, the months, years leading up to the exhibit, was the more I learned, the more I kind of thought to myself, how could it be anything but, the burial cloth of Jesus? Because it's everything, you can't explain it. Even in this century, we can't explain how the image got there. And I remember being in a conversation with a small group of people, and a person at the time was saying how they recently read an article, and it said that they were able to recreate the image on a cloth because scientists have been trying to do that. And I couldn't answer. I wasn't familiar with that research. And I couldn't answer, and I didn't know. So I got out of, later on that night when I got out of that conversation, I went to one of the experts that I trusted, who actually was an atheist and ended up studying this and is a believer now. But I asked him because he knows everything shroud, and he said, yeah, actually they've been trying to do that, but there's like 30 some factors that have to happen in order, and they haven't been able to do it. So I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. But again, you have to really get information from all different sources. It's just like any topic, that we have to know. You don't just take anything at face value. You want to hear from different people and different and that's kind of what we had at the museum. It wasn't ever about convincing people. It was really just about giving people opportunity to explain the history and just different pieces of it. Everybody can make their own conclusion of what they think it is or isn't. But anyways, that's one of the things. I think that, to me, one of the most interesting things is how, and I don't know that really a lot of people know this, is how the actual image is only on the top 1 to 2 microfibers of the cloth. And to put that in perspective, Russ Burrell, who's one of the speakers, and he's just brilliant, I know you know him too, he explained that there's 200 microfibers in a piece of thread or whatever. So that kind of gives you a visual of just how incredible it is that it can be there and provide that detail. And we didn't even know, like, the positive image was there until that was like the 1800s, 1898. So
yep.
Even that came out, not until photography was around. That it's just, again, we're saying it's fascinating.
Yeah, really. And yeah, can you imagine? I mean, one of the things too, and I remember sitting there in front of the 14.5-foot image of the replica. And I remember just contemplating, and you look at each one of the blood stains, and you can see then, what's in the Gospels. But then also, how calming that was. But also then, to your point about, what you mentioned before about what that means in terms of hope for the future and hope for yourselves, because, here is this image of what is most likely the picture, the image that took place right during the resurrection. And then, that picture, as you said, is only on those outer little layers. And then trying to reproduce how that was made so far has been incredibly difficult. And I don't think anybody's really figured out how to do it. Maybe in a little square inch, but not, across the whole length of the
And to
cloth.
make a perfect body image. Yeah. Like it's just, it's, there's a reason why, it hasn't been done. And I believe that's because God doesn't want it to be, he asks us for our faith, and faith doesn't include proof. However, he does leave behind miraculous things. I put the shroud right with the Eucharistic miracles. There's a number of things that you can't explain. A whole miracle is the fact that you can't explain it by natural, it has divine intervention somehow, because it can't be explained by the natural scientific laws. So that's what I put this in. We can't explain it. I don't think we're ever going to be able to explain it. We can do more testing. I would love to see more testing, right? But I still don't think we're going to be able to explain it. And there's, probably a reason for that. So
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I mean, I'm an engineer in my early life, and at some point you go, yes, we will be able to do it. But it's hard to believe that today in 2023, after 2,000 years, and especially the last 50 years of intensely studying the shroud, that we still haven't really figured out how it was done. So there's a good chance you might be right. We will never do it, and it is one of God's little teasers, maybe, to tease us to want to learn more, and then while learning more about what happened, that He is the all powerful, the Almighty, and He can make pictures at will with just through whatever mechanism it was. So absolutely. Let's change the topic a little bit. One thing I've noticed as I've studied the shroud, and I'm just curious as to how you see that, is there a difference between how the Catholic faith perceives the shroud and the Protestant or evangelical or potentially even the Eastern Christian religions? Do you see a difference in how those different groups of Christians view the shroud?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a great question. I don't know if it's necessarily a difference. I think I've seen a lot of people from a lot of different faith traditions want to learn about the shroud and come to different conclusions. But I think if you, so I don't, yeah, I think, people approach it differently. But if you really open it up and listen to it, and hear what it tells you, or hear what other people, really the people who have really studied it for years, and what are their conclusions, I think, you'll walk away with it with a conclusion. So I don't know that there's a difference. I think different faith traditions maybe like kind of start off with a premise. So, I don't want to pigeonhole anything or whatever, but there are certain faith traditions like that, maybe are less likely to be because of X, Y, and Z, or, but again, I think, there's plenty, the Catholic Church owns it. So maybe Catholics might be more familiar with it. That doesn't mean they necessarily believe in it, because they probably don't know enough about it. So I think the more you learn about it, regardless of whatever your religion is, you'll either continue to seek more, or you'll make an opinion and not, or whatever it is. But so I don't know if I really answered your question. I don't know that, I think you might start off with a different premise depending on that, but if you study it, who knows where you'll end up. There's millions of people that believe that the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus, and I think there's a reason for that. Everybody has different reasons, but there's literally millions.
Yeah, I think it's maybe tens, maybe even hundreds of millions that believe that it is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ. One thing too, and one thing that I see it with my own faith is that Jesus said to Thomas at something on the order of, and I never get the first part of the quote right, but blessed are you that saw, but blessed are those that have not seen and yet believe. and that
Mhm.
piece at the end, blessed are those that have not seen and yet believe. And so, he was able to see Christ, stick his fingers in the wound and see the wounds on his hands and things like that. And yet, we will not be able to experience that or do that. And yet there's so many of us that do have faith and have not seen and yet believe. And the
Mhm.
shroud, so whether the shroud is true or not, authentic or not, or proven to be a forgery or not, I don't think that's going to affect the faith of anybody, because it's blessed are those that have not seen and yet believe. So
Right, right, right. Absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, it just strengthens my faith, learning more about the shroud, but it didn't start my faith. But for some people, it actually starts it. And I know people who I've talked to with that, and that's wonderful that that can happen. God works in all sorts of ways, and I think he leaves behind these little things for us, and we can do what we can with them. But always keep your eyes open and always try and learn. I mean, that's one of God's gifts, is like our capacity to learn. And I think there's like so many amazing things like this. The shroud is probably the biggest and largest, whatever you want to call this, gift
mystery.
that God is,
Yeah.
mystery that God has given us. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. So I am a big fan of Museum of the Bible. I
Hmm.
worked there with them as a consultant for a couple of years, and it is an
Hmm.
absolute stellar organization and a stellar exhibition of all things Bible. And then, like as we've been discussing, they had the Shroud of Turin exhibit there. So tell us what else is going on there. What other really cool exhibits are coming up?
Well, they have lots of things always going on at all times. So, one of the most recent things they have is a scripture and science exhibit, which is actually pretty cool. And that started in January. It's going to be there for a full year. It's in the basement level. It actually takes up the whole basement level. Um, and the education department has worked really hard on that and come up with all these amazing programs. For specifically educators and schools to go and experience. And you can go on the website, museumofthebible.org, to get all that information. But they really have done an excellent job with that exhibit, and lots of different programming around that, especially for schools and everything, to really take advantage of that exhibit when it's there. I'm hoping that might be one that maybe could stay longer too. And then we have an exhibit in the Vatican Gallery. So they have a long-term exhibit with the Vatican. And they have an exhibit in there that just opened. That's only going to be through September, but it's on it's called Journey of Faith, the Seven Pilgrim Churches of Rome. And you can learn, they have beautiful prints in there from the Vatican Library, and you can learn about those churches. I haven't been to those churches yet. I'm hoping when I go to Rome, maybe I can hit at least a few of those. But again, there's some amazing history in there, and it's just nice. They have a film too that does a brief. It's like a 5 or 10 minute film that does a brief explanation. So that's right on the first floor. And then they also have there's another. They have actually, they have this world stage production, and starting in June, I believe, June through August. I have to look at the exact dates, but they have a production in there. It's a Broadway production of C.S. Lewis's The Horse and His Boy. Now, this came in January. It was there January through April, and they're coming it back due to popular demand. But that has that's amazing because it has these big puppeteers. Did you see that when it was there, or did you?
No, I did want to see it. One of the things that upsets me is I'm based here in Atlanta and I can't get up there to see all the exhibits. So, but yeah,
Well,
tell us about it.
so this is like a Broadway production, right? But it has these puppeteers, and what I mean by puppeteers, it's not like a little marionette. They're actual people inside the puppets, or inside, and so they're life size, and they look and act real. Like the lion and the horse they're just. It's kind of. I remember the first time they came into a room that I was in, I was like, whoa. But it's an amazing production. Like I said, it's coming back due to popular demand. It's going to be here for a short time, but if anybody in the DC area, any of your listeners, if they get a chance, I would highly recommend that. They have 2 showings a day. I think it's, you can get all that information, but
Yeah.
that's exciting. But But they have things going on all the time, especially, especially during holidays. There's always special things going on, even if it's just bringing in different singers or just different events. But the website, museumofthebible.org, always says the current exhibits and visiting exhibits and different events. There's a lot of times speaker events going on, so you just never know what you're gonna get when you go there. So highly recommend checking it out.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
is the what was it? The Boy and His Horse?
The Horse and His Boy.
The Horse and His
C.S. Lewis.
Boy,
Yeah.
C.S.
Mhm.
Lewis, who I love. He's got
Mhm.
some amazing writings. And is that one by any chance available on video online that you can sign up for?
No, not that I'm aware of. No, it's a live performance. It's actually, yeah,
Okay.
so at least for now anyways, I don't believe that's available. A lot of their programs they do offer online, but not because that's a theater production, that's not available.
Yeah.
Actually, so for our, not to switch it back to the Shroud, but just to mention some of the events that we have, if they go to the Museum of the Bible YouTube channel, there are, you can get those, you can see those speakers speak and hear about that if you're interested in more about the Shroud.
Yeah, fantastic. So museumofthebible.org, museumofthebible.org, and really truly, I mean, you're still working there, and I was there helping them for a handful of years, and really what a great venue, and certainly something that should be on everybody's bucket list. So and it's actually
Yeah.
interesting, the exhibit that you said was in the basement, it was something in science, religion and science, is that what it was?
Scripture and science. Yes.
Scripture and science, that kind of fits in with the Shroud, because you think about all of the science going into studying the Shroud and understanding what's there, and even Pope Paul, I know it's Pope John Paul that said, the Shroud is a mirror of the Gospels, and so in that respect, it's kind of like if you're studying the Shroud, then it's Scripture and the Shroud all wrapped up in the script. I'm sorry, Scripture and science is all wrapped up in the Shroud. So very good.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
what's going on next with the Shroud? I know you're involved in a couple of very interesting initiatives, and so tell us what you see next coming up with the Shroud.
Yeah, so through my work at the museum, I connected with a number of amazing people. A lot of them were the presenters. I know I think you know all of them, but anyways, we're working on getting a permanent exhibit about the Shroud in Washington, D.C. And we do have, thanks to the museum, have one of the replicas that they have at the Catholic Information Center. So if anybody goes there, they can actually see that replica. We have posters there that you can take away that explains the different markings. And that's going to be there. Hopefully, we're in the midst of extending it, hopefully right now, but it's going to be there at least hopefully through October. And we do have different events. Dr. Cheryl White, who she's a professor at Shreveport, Louisiana, and she's a curator for the exhibit that they have on the Shroud there. Anyways, she's going to be one of the speakers at the Catholic Information Center. And then I'm hoping to have Father Spitzer back in October. So anybody in the area those are people you don't want to miss. They're very just amazing speakers, just very knowledgeable on the Shroud. And, Father Spitzer has his own show on EWTN, Father Spitzer's Universe. And just, again, both of them incredible speakers about the Shroud. So.
Yeah.
So that's happening. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So yeah, we're doing that. And then we have some other through that, our ultimate goal is to have find space in DC. And you can go to the National Shroud of Turin exhibit.org and get more information. We actually have a ton of information there if you're interested in the Shroud, but we're going to be at a couple different events. Some of our team members are World Youth Day in Portugal. Dr. Cheryl White at Nordcreech are going to be there with Father Andrew Dalton. He's going to be having a breakout session there. And so that's just some of the things that we have going on. There's a full listing on that website, National Shroud of Turin exhibit.org. So again, lots of things happening. It's going to continually be updated. And I would just check that out because that is a source. Also shroud.com, which Barry Schwartz, that has everything Shroud related too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got to meet Barry, well, over the phone through shroud.com. And then he and I were
Mhm.
together with Nora Creech out in Texas with an opening of another
Oh, did
Shroud
you go to
exhibit.
that?
I
Yeah.
did with the
Okay.
National Museum of Funeral History. And
Yeah,
you go, well, how could that fit in? And you go, no, 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 the Shroud represents the greatest funeral of all. And so
exactly.
it's a perfect fit out there, and they really did a wonderful job. And I think you
Hmm.
can find out more information on that. It's nmfh.org. If I
Hmm.
remember correctly, the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston. And
Hmm.
really, just a great. If you're in that area, definitely go there and get to see an incredible replica of the shroud as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the National Shroud of Turin exhibit.org, that is kind of this initiative which has the current exhibit at the Catholic Information Center. And then I think
It
you mentioned that you're going to have a couple of very, very interesting and excellent speakers on the shroud coming up.
coming there July. There would be Dr. Cheryl White, and then October, I'm hoping to have Father Spitzer there. So we're just working on all the details of that. We'll have some more information will be coming out shortly, probably in the next week or so for the July event. So people can come sign. You do need to register, but it is a free event. But it will be good.
Yeah,
Cheryl's
fantastic.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Cheryl really is. And well, so I'm hoping I have another trip coming up to DC in the next month or two. And if that's the case, then I'd definitely look forward to going to the Catholic Information Center and then definitely
Yeah.
supporting whatever we can do with the National Shroud of Turin exhibit so that we can get that off the ground. I think it's such a good cause that you and I think Myra Adams and Nora Creech and I think Cheryl White is also involved in it.
Cheryl's on it too. Yeah. So is Russ.
Yeah, yeah. And
Joe Marino.
hopefully,
I think all the people you know.
yeah, all the people, all the big guys. That's
All the
fantastic.
Shroudies. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, and they'll also be at I don't know if you're familiar with Focus Conference Seek in January they have their big conference in St. Louis, and we're going to be having a breakout session there too with Father Andrew Dalton, and Nora and Cheryl will be there also to answer questions. So these are just great opportunities to again spread the word about the shroud and really get people more interested in learning more about it and all the
Yeah.
mysteries that it
Well,
has.
that's right. And I think it is, like we talked about, the shroud is probably one of the greatest mysteries that there is in the world right now.
Mhm.
And to your point, it may actually stay that way for quite a long time, if not forever.
I mean, I think it is going to stay that way. That's my own personal opinion. I think it really puts at the forefront. The question is, that whole term, who do you say that I am? And that's for everyone to decide for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it sounds like you definitely have a lot of momentum going now with the National Shroud of Turin exhibit. So, with
Yeah.
those couple of events, the things you're doing at the Catholic Information Center, wow, that's fantastic. Really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
is
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I think, again, I think everything about the shroud, it just kind of things just happen. And I believe, God has his hand in it and all in his time.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely fantastic. Is there anything before we close? Is there anything else you'd like to mention or bring up?
No, I would just encourage in general people, if you have an opportunity to learn something about the Shroud of Turin, hear a speaker, read a book, read your book.
Yeah, thank you.
I would encourage people to do it because it will not disappoint. Again, it is fascinating. The more you learn about it, the more fascinated you will become. And I think that's typically the experience that people have as they kind of open up and listen to what the shroud has to tell us
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Absolutely, and the
So,
shroud has a lot to tell us, not only about the shroud itself, but also about our faith,
mhm,
and more incredible, the enormous price that Jesus Christ paid for us, and
mhm,
evidenced by the shroud. So
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one of the things that historians talk about is I think before certain points, before 1356, and then after 1356, what they can track, what the shroud is. And even before that time, the culture, the legends, the art showed the shroud, even though they can't, track it. And I think, again, that's all, to me, that's very fascinating because, we don't really have concrete evidence, but it shows up in the art and the coins, especially. And so that I think speaks volumes too. But it's again, it's not, like we said, it's not something that can be definitely proved. And maybe that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you bring that up. I'm in the process of writing a more of a scientific paper. So my book, The Only Witness, is more about the shroud as a historical fiction, tracing as best as possible what the history is from, Golgotha in 33 AD up till modern day now in Turin. But to your point, I'm putting together as many as I can find artworks that are pre 1356, the first real writing of when the shroud took place, of where the shroud might have been, and then the artwork that was generated that is most likely based on the different components that make up the face and the image on the shroud. And so
Wow.
I think through that, there's definitely a very good history that the shroud did exist prior to 1356 and did exist, all the way going back to 33 AD.
Well, I'm sure we're going to find out more about that.
Yeah, it's coming. Stay tuned.
I do think more is coming. So that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, one thing, you mentioned Joe Marino. Joe and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that he said is that the interest in the shroud and the number of papers and books and videos and whatever that, and podcasts like this one, has exploded over the last year or two. It has really, really changed. And I think that's a good thing. The more we learn, or the more people learn about the shroud, the more value that brings to everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's things, God puts things in front of you when you need them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so with that, Lisa, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk to people that are very knowledgeable on the shroud and get their perspectives on various things. And definitely want to thank you for participating today. So where can people find out more information about some of the initiatives that you have going on?
I would go, so if all shroud related things, I would go to the National Shroud of Turin exhibit.org. That is the best source. We're going to be adding a few updates, in the next week or so. But that actually has, for people who are interested in the shroud, that actually is a great resource to tell us to tell you what we're doing with that particular entity. So yeah.
Fantastic.
That would be the best place.
Yeah, absolutely. So National Shroud of Turin exhibit.org.
It's a mouthful, but
it is a mouthful. But once you type it in one time, then it's always in your browser and you just have to click on it.
Exactly.
So it's not that bad. But the other one we mentioned as well, and I always want to give a shout out to Museum of the Bible. Museum of the Bible is just such a great resource. It has really cool stuff going on and new stuff. We talked about Scripture and Science, the exhibit. We talked about this play or musical that's going on with The Horse and the Boy, if I get it right.
The Horse and His Boy. The Horse and His Boy. Yeah, and that's coming out in June. Yeah, boy.
Yeah,
Voice and His Boy.
And
so that's coming out in June. We always have different things going on. If you go to museumofthebible.org, under events, there's you can see or different exhibits. There's lots of information. So there's always new things happening. I mean, literally, there's something going on all the time. So we'd love to have you there. It's just a great place to visit. You can never just come back once. Let me just say that, because there's always something more to do. And it's enormous. So you really don't want to experience it all at once. There's too much to see. I mean, you could spend several hours just on one floor. But yeah, museumofthebible.org. That is a great place to visit if you're ever in the DC area.
Absolutely. And I agree with you multiple times. If you don't live in the DC area, it is absolutely a bucket list item, museumofthebible.org. And with that, again, thank you, Lisa. And to the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. Please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And if you like this episode, please rate it with 5 stars. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. So glad to have you.
Okay. Take care.